Do you know that optimal brain state when everything is simple and clear? When you walk into a room and immediately know what everyone needs and what to do? When you can make optimal decisions right away and feel happy? The topic of this discussion is how and why to upgrade your brain with nootropics, with nootropic expert Mark Effinger, also known as Mr. Noots. This podcast is obviously in English because my guest is English speaking. As with every podcast, I have my takeaways and insights for you in the show notes and as a video on YouTube in German. So if this is helpful, please subscribe to my channel. Feel free to share the podcast and the video on social media and leave us a review on Apple and Spotify. And now, without further delay, let's have fun and explore this optimal brain states and how to create them on your own.
Man, no, and it's funny because we did go through a lot of that. Wade, obviously you've spoken with Wade, and he's as vegetarian as they come. And I just got off a call 2 weeks ago with Paul Chek, who is also hardcore in natural, and then my other partner Matt Gallant is like keto steak, right? Carnivore. And so it's nice to see that contrast and to see how people resolve that as far as a methodology for performance, right?
Yeah. But what did you have before the podcast right now for your brain?
Oh, it's great. So let me show you what I do. Let me show you what I do. I do this. So I've been working on a new potentiated CoQ10 type of ubiquinol type of supplement that to make it so that I'm getting about somewhere between 800 and 1200 milligrams of ubiquinol in my system. Mm-hmm. So I've got that, and then I've got this is what I do is I create these micro stacks of this is Upbeat, and this is Brain Flow.
Yeah.
Do you have any of our products yet? Any of the Nootopia products?
No, not yet.
We're going to send you some. So
I'm so interested in all that stuff. So I tried a lot of the single stuff, but then I got introduced in your approach and all the stacking. That's so fascinating, and I would really love to cover that.
Let's do that, man. I think it's a really core part of what we call sick to superhuman when you're trying to move from. And everybody enters the sick to superhuman spectrum at a different point. I mean, some people are like they're almost superhuman on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I did an interview with Kyle Kingsbury down, who is an Onnit fighter. So we were at Onnit Labs and interviewing him. Well, he's very, very self-aware. He knows exactly what works for him. And then I met some people that are going, I don't know where I'm at. I may be sick. I may be superhuman. I don't know. And so you've got to kind of work with them and try to decode what their real neurological and physiological performance is, and then go, oh, okay, we're entering it at suboptimal, near optimal, and let's go tweak it a bit and get you to super optimal, and then you can go superhuman on demand. Like we do it this way. When you've hit very level flash when you're definitely coming onto them. But it is a process, it's a science, and it's customization is a key to it as well. So
it's interesting you mentioned Paul Chek. And I learned a lot from Paul Chek, and Paul Chek always talks about having a dream. So I think that's pretty important. So we talk about superhuman, we talk about the brain, but how does a 100% brain feels like? So what could be the dream? That's what I want for the listener.
I love it.
Everybody says, my brain is good. Hey, my brain is good. But what is good? What is optimal? How could it feel?
Well, I think that's a super question. And it surprised me when I originally started developing these stacks in 2008. And then prior to that, in around 2003, 4, 5, I started working with an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor, which is basically it's a compound. Huperzine A is the name of it. And what it does is it basically keeps acetylcholine available in the synapse and increases the electrical potential so that you are not fighting, cognitive performance there. And that was the aha moment for me. And then the second aha was in 2008 was if you start removing the barriers to performance, meaning if you start looking at oxidative stress on the body, if you start looking at inflammatory conditions, adaptogen, like what's your adaptogenic tolerance? I called it a fault tolerant physiology. Because I have a lot of background in computer technology and internet technologies from many of the companies I did prior to this in a former life. One of the things that you have anytime you have a data center is you've got a backup system that switches on within milliseconds of a lightning strike or a power shortage or anything like that. And that was always interesting to me because as I was dealing with my own physiological and neurological challenges, what if I could get to a performance level that was, super optimal, like beyond what people normally experience on a day-to-day? And then what if when the shit went down, so to speak, when stuff, when you had challenges or you had a crappy night of sleep or whatever, what if you had a fault tolerant physiology that dealt with it in an elegant way so that you didn't experience the downside effects of that? So that was kind of my theorem on that. So what does it feel like to have your brain 100%? If you haven't been there before, it's a quantum leap in performance. And the thing that you notice right away is that your ability to actually intuit or feel what other people are thinking and feeling is very high. An experience I had, want me to share an experience I had on this?
Sure.
So I was hypothyroid in 1993. I was diagnosed severe hypothyroidism. And so I got on desiccated thyroid, bovine thyroid, and that made a quantum change in everything. I was now awake. I felt like I was sleeping through the last 4 or 5 years of my life. You know what I mean? Just never quite got that awakefulness that you might, otherwise experience. And so I got on thyroid. I started exercising again. I was an athlete, and then suddenly I was working, 80, 90-hour weeks. And it's very difficult to try to fit in a good bodybuilding routine or a good maintenance routine when you're killing yourselves behind a desk and a computer. And of course, I was on the original Macintoshes. So I was on a really slow machine. But what happened was after about 6 months of being on thyroid, drinking a lot of, plenty of fluids, right? And and eating fairly clean, I suddenly felt really incredible at a level that I hadn't felt since I was a little kid or since I was a performance athlete, right? In my teens. And it was incredible. So these guys that wanted to build laser systems that give you a laser light show in movie theaters, they called me up and said, "Hey, we need you to come out and negotiate a deal for us." And so I flew out to New York, to Manhattan. I went up to one of these towers, that's many, many, many floors above the Earth's surface. And I walk in and I could feel that these people were at each other's throats. And because I was so cognitively on fire, so aware, so clear, I could sense what everybody was wanting and thinking. And I sat down and the tension was just too high. So I grabbed a whiteboard marker. I stood up, I pivoted around. I had no idea what I was going to do. And I just started whiteboarding the situation. You guys want lasers. You guys want to make lasers, and you guys want to fund people making lasers. And, for the theater industry, here's some ideas. And then we just started riffing. And about 15 minutes into it, I had everybody laughing instead of trying to kill each other. And another half hour, and we were writing what's called a term sheet, which is a document that basically says, we want to invest in a certain portion of your company for X number of millions of dollars. And we're willing to, to give this, and you're going to give this in exchange, this kind of stock and warrants and upside. And everybody was super happy. And that was when I realized that my mind was back, that I was at 100%. Right. And then the next one was in 2008, when I started formulating these products. By the time I hit the summer of 2011, my son, who had been up all night with his buddies playing music in their recording studio, he comes in and says, "Hey man, we need some of your Jesus juice." That's what they called Nectar X. So it was probably called Nectar X, which is in a tube. And here, I'll grab one for you. So yeah, Jesus juice, man. That's Nectar. And so I poured this stuff and I made one molecule change to the formula. It was already getting pretty good, like enough that our beta testers, we had a little over 1,000 beta testers, that they were saying, "Hey, this is a lot like the thing in that movie, Limitless with Bradley Cooper." And so I was trying to figure out what to name it. And they said, "Just name it NZT." And so that's what we did. We named it NZT. But my son asked for this, thing. And I mixed up a batch in a cauldron. I did a witch's prayer over the top of it and lit some candles and did it, and started meditating on it. And what came out of that was a dramatically enhanced formulation that affected the CNS, the central nervous system, in a very positive way. It just basically breaks your state up, right? So your state of awareness was very high then. Your state of creativity or lateral thinking was super high. So they could actually come up with lyrics and guitar riffs and drums and the rest. And they came back 40 minutes later. And this is in my, they come back to my bedroom, right? They go, "Dude." And they just like storm into my bedroom and go, "Dude, we just wrote a song in 40 minutes. We'd never written a song in less than a month. And whatever you got in that stuff, man, it's rocking us. We'll see you later." And then they wrote 3 or 4 more songs that day. So it's great, right? So that was the aha moment. And then I started formulating with that nutrient density, and that became the baseline product. So when your brain is on 100%, meaning not that your brain is super saturated and you're going, if you ever saw Scarlett Johansson in Lucy, right? That was kind of like the metaphorical, like what happens when your brain's totally on? Well, you can change time and you can shift location and you can, you can do all this stuff. And that's not so true. But what is true for people that haven't experienced like optimum and super optimal and superhuman performance is you approach life with this vim and vigor, this excitement and energy and commitment that is much higher than you might otherwise. It is a state. If you've, are you an athlete?
Yes, I'm an athlete, and I'm doing a lot of ice bathing, breath work, and all that stuff. So that's interesting, because for me, after ice baths or breath work, it's like a couple of minutes I'm in this state, or maybe an hour. But I'm thinking about, hey, is it possible to have it all day long? This ultimate states of creativity, productivity, and clarity, and ultimate empathy, and I'm a better human. Yeah.
Right. That's a great one, because a lot of people talk about, like, I used to, about twice a month, I would take Adderall when I had a technology company in the internet space doing search engine optimization platforms. And when I would take Adderall, I would take about twice a month just to get a bunch of shit done. And my associates, my employees would come in, they would see me on this like super laser focused mode, typing away and doing, and like just, or whiteboarding something really complex and trying to get it clarified. And they would notice that I had zero empathy. I was super focused, and they called it the asshole drug, because I was a total asshole. And I think that's what people perceive at what super performance is. But as you've said, super performance is when your empathy, your connectivity, your love, right? Your heart is open. And because you need to have that connectivity with people to operate with groups of people. And the other is that you're also able to get stuff done and not necessarily lose that empathy in the context of that. And so you're not so empathetic that you're like you're totally abandoning your goals and your thoughts, but you are empathetic enough to connect with people and work with them and think through the words you might use. I think that's a great example. When I used to walk through my house, my wife used to work for me. Before she died, she worked for me. And what she would do or what I would do is I would walk through the house and I go, "Okay, honey, we got to do this, and this. I'll see you at the office." Yeah. And then I would wonder why she was so cold to me and I wasn't getting any nookie, and it was like, what the hell's going on here? Until a few days later. And then I go, oh, right. I was an asshole. And then I started being cognizant of it. I actually took a course on how to do that. Right. That's how ignorant I was, being a total geek and nerd and much more on the, the critical brain thinking and executive brain function than on the creative and loving. And so it used to take 4 days for me to actually realize what I'd done, the offense. And by that time, it was kind of like almost too late to say I'm sorry. But I started working on it. I started getting it down like to the second day and then the first day. And then like within a few hours, And then the real breakthrough, and this is like 100% of your brain operating, was as I was walking through the house to go out to the car and I needed to talk to my wife, I would stop and I would run through in my mind in milliseconds. I would run through the word choice. Where am I going to start? What are my objectives? And how much I love her. And so I would come in and say, honey, I don't know if I told you how beautiful you are today, but I need to give her a big hug and say, hey, I'm going to head to the office right now. Is there anything you need today? Or how can I serve you today? And then I could say, then I had permission to say, hey, if you happen to think about it, there's a couple things that I need. If you could pick those up, that would rock. And I'll see you at the office. And that changed everything. So it's the distance between, Ray Dalio would call it third order consequences, right? You do something and you go, and then suddenly you find out that your whole world just fell apart because you did something not thinking about the next iteration of that and the next iteration of that. And then suddenly you're realizing you're offending a whole group of people, or you're pissing somebody off, or you're doing a deal that's going to result in your ultimate demise. You're going bankrupt because of it. It's that third order consequences. And when your brain is really on fire, really operating well, you kind of intuitively know good decisions versus bad. And you also start looking at those consequences, those third order consequences, before you ever even approach that problem. You just look at the problem and go, okay, third order consequence is this. Let's go a different direction. This is not going to work. But you don't have to spend all, you don't have to whiteboard the whole thing for 2 days. You don't have to, sit on it. Oh, let me think on that for a while. You don't have to think on it. It's just instantaneous. So that's my take.
So beautiful what you said. Yeah, that's so beautiful. Because I'm in Germany right now. I think Germans are, it's interesting because, for example, you're talking about biological optimization, or Tim Gray in UK call it the Health Optimization Summit. And for Germans, the optimization is relatively bad. We think about high performance and being an asshole. Germans don't like the term optimization. So that's funny. We have a biohacking conference, but we don't call it biohacking or optimization. We call it the Flow Fest. It's the same concept, but we call it the Flow Fest. Germans like to be
Stephen Kotler flow type thing.
Yeah, more like this. So we do the same, like you in US or Tim in UK, but we need other terms because Germans often think high performance mean being an asshole. But it's so beautiful that you say, if I'm a high performer, I can be high performing in my relationships. And for example, so Wade is such an enlightened being. He's so great heart, but he's a high performer too.
Oh, so super high performer. Yeah. In fact, he's a great example. I love Wade for so many reasons, but one of the things that I noticed when I first met him, he came down to visit me at my company, the one that became Nootopia. And he walks in and he's a formidable presence, not because he's the tallest guy in the room, nor is he the biggest guy in the room. He's the most radiant person in the room. He just beams love and kindness and joy. He's got this infectious laugh when he gets going, and it's just crazy. And it was it was an epiphany for me to go, wow, this guy is a rock star, but there is not and he can be tough. He can be very tough because his belief systems are so concrete. But I don't know anybody on our team that would say, oh, that asshole Wade. They would all say, oh man, he's the best. I can't wait to spend more time with him. I feel elevated. That's one thing he's really great at is he sees the great in you. Matt is super good at this as well. He sees what your genius is. And then he says, here's your genius. Let's go explore that. Let's go play with that. Let's go give you the ingredients to make that even better. And then you're spending your whole life, like I came with a critical mind that said, you suck at this, you're bad at this, you don't do well at that, that kind of thing. It took me years of reprogramming to go, okay. And taking things like Strength Finder. If you know Strength Finder, great. Yeah, right. It's like you go, aha, I am really good at this. I mean, I am inherently good at this. The research says so. And then, so I'm just going to focus on this stuff. And that's what Wade is really great at, is pulling it out of you, showing it to you, even if you don't know it, and going, come on, put your arm around, puts his arm around you and says, come on, let's go play in this area. I think we'll have a lot of fun. And that's the other thing is, I think when you're operating, when you're firing on all cylinders, so to speak, is you both recognize the greatness in people. Like immediately you have this kind of intuitive cognitive resolve of, oh, I bet they're really great at that. And you want to work with them to elevate it. You want to hang with them and just experience their, their genius, so that you and elevate it further. Give it a little fuel for that fire, and see how high they can get with that, and help them break through their limiting beliefs, which is a super powerful. That's the superstar power of, I think, nootropics is you think that your limit is here. In fact, you even gate or you limit your throttle. You just don't press down on the throttle all the way because you're afraid you won't have enough left later on in the day or tomorrow. So you're always operating it at 30, 40, 50, 60% of your potential. But when you know that you can actually get to a state on demand through neurochemical enhancement or physiological change or meditation or breath work, right? Or jumping in an ice bath, and you do that hormetic stress on your physiology, and suddenly you're going, boom, all right. I know when I get out, I know that this is going to be a painful experience. Huberman talks about that, right? Like, just turn the shower on a little colder and do it every day, and then a little colder and a little colder and a little colder, before you, and don't do breath work and then go jump in an ice bath when you're, a newbie in this whole thing. That might be a little dangerous, but it's really powerful. And what it does is it gets you to a point where you start believing, which is kind of the core of doing. You start believing that your potential is up here. And there are things that people do when they're up here and when they're at this potential level, that are extreme. Like I used to motorcycle road race. So when I get behind my Kawasaki and I would get at 145 miles an hour, and there would be a very tight hairpin curve, I knew that I was going to have to roll the bike over until I started scraping parts, right? And then I was going to get my knee on the ground. My knee there was these nylon nubs right on the knee of my leathers. And I was going to balance my body. So my body was upright, but the bike was over. And I was going to do this kind of ballet thing while I was hitting the throttle and breaking the back tire loose so I could make it around that hairpin. And then I was going to have to lean into the bike and this is all happening in milliseconds. I was going to have to lean into the bike, and I was going to have to put my weight over the front wheel, because when I hit that throttle again, as I went from third gear to fourth and then fifth, and I went down to 120, which felt like I was walking, and then back up to 145 or 160, I'd have to keep that front wheel down because the torque and horsepower was so high. And you're doing this balance, and that balance happens whether you're playing a sport or whether you're actually getting up on the whiteboard or whether you're having a meeting with somebody. You're always in this dance. And when you realize that and you get out of your freaking critical mind and start playing with that state of connectivity, that state of focus, that state of creativity, right? That state of innovation, that state of love, you start getting into that state, you can start like dialing in those states on demand because you built the neural pathways. You know what the neurochemicals feel like when they're optimized to that. You can go into that state. You can close your eyes and go into that state before you ever, you don't have to. The nootropics are a component to enhance all of that. They help you get there before you know how to get there. And over time, they help you groove in neural pathways so that you can just go, I want to go there. So anyhow, yeah.
Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah, that's, for me, it's sometimes like a remembering. So that's why I ask about we have to create a dream. We have to create a dream and have to we have to remember how it could feel. And if we anchor that feeling, we can go into maybe without nootropics one time. Who knows? So, but we need this remembering. We need this dream. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when I was I'm obviously the poster child for ADHD, right? So for those of you out there with ADHD, it is your superpower. Don't let anybody tell you different. And I was working in a company called E-Agency. The founder of that company had worked in my incubator. And when we in venture capital, when you invest all of the funds, then you either go out and raise another round of venture capital, or you move on. And so what happened to me was I invested all the money in these various startup companies. IBM, Compaq, and Microsoft said, we're not sure if the internet's really going to stay around. This is 2000, right? 2001. So we're and 9/11 had just happened. And one of my clients said, hey, I want to acquire you, and I want to acquire your, what you're doing. I like your process and those things. But I was still this hyper ADHD kind of guy. I was really good at innovation and creativity. I wasn't good at execution. Like I wasn't a good integrator. Thank God my company has incredible integrators. I'm surrounded by them. So I can still be crazy and wild. But I've also learned how to do a state change, right? We talk about NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And what I would do, this is in 2000, 2001, is I would go to Napster, I would download, or LimeWire, right? I would download episodes of the TV show Kung Fu, which was a 1970s television show about a guy, a Shaolin monk who left the monastery and was in the Old West. And then he had to kind of like navigate the Old West looking, I think, for his brother, who was in the States. So he left, he left Asia and moved to the States. But he was still like a Buddhist monk, right? A Taoist monk. And he was a Kung Fu expert. I mean, absolute super black belt, right? Because he had lived in the monastery. That's all they did all day long. They did katas and they did meditation and they did, theorem. And so he would fight that. So I'd watch those because watching him do the equivalent of like Tai Chi and where you're moving energy around and you're modeling animal movements got me into the state of calm focus. It was focus, but it wasn't that manic focus that you might have on Adderall or something. It was this wonderfully calm focus that helped me to follow through. And then I would do this thing, and my boss taught me this at the time. Bob Lauder is his name. And Bob said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to, when you find yourself with 26 emails all open, this is back then when you had when you had your Microsoft client, on all the different emails, is he goes, I want you to smack your leg so you hear it and you feel it, right? That's a physical manifestation. I want you to say, complete the cycle. So complete the cycle. So that instead of moving on to the next unfinished email, the next unfinished draft of something, the next person that will just walk across the room that you want to talk to for something, you're going to finish the cycle. And that state change that happened as a result of making a sound, having a physical event, and then repeating my mantra, complete the cycle or finish the cycle, was a radical state change component that got me doing a lot more work in a lot less time with a lot more joy. It was actually a joke to me. After a while, you're laughing, you're going, okay, I've got 11 unfinished emails. How about if I finish one, you idiot? And then I just state change, complete the cycle, done. And you actually felt this feeling of accomplishment and fulfillment. That dopaminergic reward system that Huberman would talk about, is you would feel that as you put yourself in that state, completed that and sent, right? And you got this nice little dopamine rush, kind of like a like on Facebook or an Instagram or any of those, is you got that beautiful dopamine rush that came with that, which encouraged you to do another one, which, it fuels itself, right? Reward system fuels itself. So yeah, getting into state and then finding the tools, the various tools to be able to optimize that state on demand is really critical for super high performance and being able to really make the best of your days and your nights.
Yeah, beautiful. You talked about this continuum from sick to superhuman.
Yeah, man.
And where does it make sense to start with nootropics? Because you talked about you cleaned up your diet, you do your exercise and all that stuff. But should we start to optimize our brain with nootropics when we did all the basics, or what are the basics? Yeah, or does it make sense to start with nootropics if we are sick, or you know what I mean?
So yeah, totally, man. All right, so let me show you something. By the way, this is in the next 2 months, when you receive your nootropics, they'll be in these little cases.
Yeah.
Currently, we ship in test tubes and things like that, but now it's just beautiful little cases. So I'm gonna do a breakdown of one of our capsules for you, and this one is called Upbeat. It's basically a mood enhancing, serotonin dominant neurochemical stack. And so when we build our stacks, so that's an example, okay? They've got all these various elements to them, and they're not stacked like this because it was cosmetically pretty. That was a byproduct, a secondary byproduct that I'm pretty happy with. But what it was so I did 3,000 formulations to get our first product, which is now called NectarX. I did 3,000 formulations to get there, from just pairing molecules together, sending them to people saying, this stuff's going to taste like crap, but tell me how it makes you feel. And so I did that over and over and over and over and over, and eventually arrived at what's called NectarX. And then I built a capsule as well. But what I found in this stack design was that most people had an adaptogenic, they basically had like an adrenal burnout or adrenal fatigue or adrenal insufficiency, but basically they had this weird response rate that was kind of a knee-jerk reaction to life, and they needed to manage that. So the first thing I did was I built an adaptogen stack. And then the second thing was, and that may have been first or second actually, second thing was people have an inflammatory response that they're working with right now. A lot of people are inflamed for whatever reason, diet or some secondary or tertiary factor. The toxins in the air that we breathe and the stuff we drink and alcohol and other things can cause this inflammatory response. So I needed to build an anti-inflammatory component to the stack. And then another component was the body is, so many of the processes in the body are dependent upon enzymes to work. And in fact, Bioptimizers, our parent company, that's kind of the core thing with Bioptimizers is we do enzymes. See, I got some over here. And so getting your enzymes balanced and working well. But B vitamins are a core element of the enzymatic activity in the body and brain. So I need to have a really hardcore methylated B vitamin stack to work with. And then that led to, okay, now we got these components going. Let's put a nootropic in there. What if we had a stack of nootropic compounds, and let's angle those nootropics towards a very specific neurotransmitter. So maybe it's serotonin. In this case, it is serotonin. Okay. Now it's not all serotonin, and it's not serotonin directly. It's precursors to serotonin with signaling molecules to promote the serotonin uptake into the brain and creation, and as well as in the gut. But on top of that, you don't want to have just one neurochemical that's just spiking real hard, because that's going to put you out of balance. You want to have, with serotonin, you want to have a little bit of dopamine, right? You might want to have a little bit of norepinephrine, right? A little bit of adrenaline on there as well. And you might even want to have a little bit of GABA, like just enough to take off the edge of the noradrenaline or norepinephrine. And so you start building the stacks like you would, like if you were EQing some audio. You want to bring up the bass a little bit, bring up the mid-range, or maybe bring the mid-range up and you bring the bass down and you bring the highs down, but you don't take them to zero. That sounds artificial and it feels artificial. You want to have them in balance. And then you want to, okay, cool. But one of the other characteristics is when you start working with your neurochemicals, one of the primary ones for thinking and for memory and thought processing is, of course, acetylcholine. So we're bringing serotonin up, but we also want to make sure that acetylcholine isn't depleted. So we're going to use a choline donor. I love CDP choline or citicholine in Europe. That's what it's called. I think that's a great one. And there's other precursors to choline as well that convert to choline on demand, right? Alcar is a great one, acetyl-L-carnitine. And then, so now you got this going on. So we got a choline donor, we got our nootropic, our nootropic base formula. And then you want to kind of go, okay, what happens in the brain when you've got all of these components working is you get a little bit of it's like when you turn on a window, like what you wish you had right now is when you turn on a window air conditioner, right? And the lights dim in your house because it drags so much current. The same thing happens when the enzymatic processes start. So you want to put a gentle, kind of long lasting, not super long lasting, but you want to put a stim layer, a number of stimulants that work together in harmony to basically bring your awareness level, your wakefulness level up while the enzymatic process is happening and kind of breaking apart as the nootropics get through the blood-brain barrier carried by the oil components in the end of this cap. You'll see there's oil components, as well as vitamin D3 and vitamin K2 in there as well, because those hormones, with vitamin D is actually a hormone, those work to actually potentiate the nootropics. And anybody that's been through COVID also knows that it's incredible for like reinforcing the body's own immune system. Again, another thing to to basically, if you improve the immune system, you improve the oxidative, right? The antioxidant force, you improve the adaptogenic force, and you reduce inflammation. And now your baseline is really good, so that when you enter the sick to superhuman, scale, you're entering further along the scale than I'm sick, I'm inflamed, I'm fatigued, my adaptogenic response sucks. So one of the things people don't know is when you're working with chronic stress over time, it affects the way the adrenaline is released. You get that adrenaline pump because something shitty happened in your life just now. You got the bad email, you got the financial terror, the bill that wouldn't go away. You're facing bankruptcy. You've got just the shit's going down. They're handing you your eviction notice, or whatever it is, or your key player in your company is asked. He's going, hey, I want to go do my own thing, or your best customer said, hey, these people came to us. They offered us a deal we couldn't refuse, so we're leaving you, right? Or your spouse goes, you were fun for the first 10 years, and now you suck. I'm out of here. So when that happens, you get this adrenaline spike, right? And a cortisol spike. And then the serotonin in your gut, which your gut is making by far the majority, over 90% of the serotonin is in your gut. So it starts going, help. And it tries to protect your heart, which is about to burst out of your chest. And so the serotonin gets used up in trying to protect you. And then when that happens, now you can't think clearly. You go into a funk, you go into a fog, and you can't operate well. So that's one factor that we're all dealing with on a regular basis. And if we don't build up a layer of adaptogenic response that is healthy, that is, that's nutrient and physiologically and neurologically supported, then we're going to go through these massive cycles. Every time something crappy happens, we're going to go into a hole. We're going to stay there until our serotonin can recuperate, until our cortisol levels go down, right? Until our noradrenaline quits pumping and our heart gets, back, and our dopamine is restored. So that's a thing that we deal with. So when you go into the sick to superhuman curve, I call it the secret sauce. And sauce is sick, suboptimal, optimal, right? SSO, super optimal, and superhuman. And it is a scale that most of us are somewhere in that scale, right? Some enter it at optimal, some operate suboptimal, some do enter it sick, some go to sick. They were like super optimal or even superhuman at times, but then they got poof, they get into a sickness. They get some chronic illness happen, some unexpected mold, right? Toxicity and mold. Dave Asprey 101, right? Mycotoxins. And so it's really important for us to kind of take an inventory of where we're at. Like when you go to Nootopia.com, we have a button you can press right at the top of the page. It says, give me my neurochemical analysis. And we ask you a battery of questions. It's based on the Braverman test. We ask you a battery of questions, and out of that you go, oh, you're acetylcholine dominant, your serotonin sucks, but your dopamine is about halfway, and your GABA seems to be halfway. So you think at that neurochemical makeup, you think that you're performing well. I mean, like, you don't feel bad. You seem to do okay at work. But in reality, if I give you the right neurotransmitters at the right time, when you're in the right state of mind, you suddenly go bing, and you go, holy shit, man, I feel so much better. I feel much more optimistic. I'm able to, the monkey brain isn't beating me up every move I make. It's not making me second guess my stuff. I'm not depressed anymore. And so you're entering that sick to superhuman, maybe at optimal now, or maybe just past suboptimal. And then you can go, okay, I really need to be conversant today. So I'm going to take Brain Flow and Upbeat, and I'm going to do a little bit of Xamarin Juice. I'm going to throw some Xamarin Juice on there and go, and now my GABA, serotonin, a little bit of dopamine are up there, and my noradrenaline's not freaking me out. Now I function like a badass. And so you can kind of take inventory, wake up in the morning, you do I do a 20-minute meditation in the morning, right? I do some breath work, some Qigong breath work. And then, and I take my Noots, I do 24 ounces of water. I take some oils, I kind of like prep my system. I do some fiber. I do a tiny bit of a base protein. And then after that's kind of gotten into my system, I then take my Noots. I do my meditation. When I come out of my meditation, I feel like a freaking rock star. I go and do maybe EWOT, exercise with oxygen therapy. I'll go run. I run stairs now. Instead of running long distances, I run up, right? And then I jog down. Like I zigzag down and do that. Do kind of like footwork, like boxer type footwork, and those kinds of things to get my system up to state, and also get those nootropics pushing through the blood-brain barrier so they're optimized. By the time I'm done with that routine, my performance level is so much higher than I was at my very best when I was 16 years old or when I was 25 years old in bodybuilding, or, because I know what my state was before. I have a bit of a gratitude practice I like to do on a daily basis, and which really helps. I think it's one of its most significant improvements in my life was being thankful for where I'm at, being thankful for people like yourself, Tim, who are making an impact on the world and trying to improve people's operating state. And I get to do what I consider meaningful work. And I think that's a great start. And I think once you adopt that mindset of I'm here to do something that's valuable. I don't care if that's freaking filling in accounting cells on an Excel sheet, or if it is going and making the next great medical, discovery, or to just be really cool with your friends and family or associates, or even just being cool to yourself, loving yourself and understanding how important that is. Those are critical components to a worthwhile existence in life. We're only on this earth for, 80, 90, 100, 120 Dave Asprey years, 180 Dave Asprey years, right? Yeah. I think what Dave is doing is he's getting in his state is getting into the state of dog years. He's going to like rewrite human years. So 180 will only be 90 years, but it'll be like rock star for 90 years and then turn the light off, right?
Yeah. Yeah, sounds great. Yeah, your father was a monk, right?
My father was a Trappist monk. Yeah, from 15 to 18 years old. He did not. That was a good score, man. Nice, you did your back. He from 15 when he felt a real calling to go and serve God, or serve his spiritual, deity. And so, thank you so much. Chastity is my life support system, among other things. So she brought me some fruit because I need glucose in my system to. Your brain uses glucose, whether you like. I mean, I can go ketogenic with the best of them, but your brain loves glucose.
Yeah.
So dad was a monk, which is really great for me because when I was a kid, I got the fallout of him being a monk was he was super loving, super kind. When he spoke to me when I was a very young child, he got down on his knee and he went face to face with me. Like he thought that I'm one of 6 children, so I'm number 5 of 6 near the bottom. And he just believed that if he treated us like the human potential that we are, that we would kind of respond to that and we would fulfill, we would live in those shoes. So for 3 years, my dad didn't speak. He sang Gregorian chants in Latin. And actually, Sunday breakfast, before we would go to church in the morning, my dad, we grew up Catholic, so that's a Trappist monk, is my dad wanted to become a priest. And as my mom says, your dad wanted to become a priest, but I made him a father instead. A little Catholic humor for you. You did. But he would make bacon and eggs for 6 kids in the morning. So he'd get this big cast iron pan, and he would treat the pan, he would oil the pan, and then he'd mix up a dozen eggs or more. And then he'd cook some bacon slices in there and use the oil from the bacon to treat the pan. And then and he'd make that. And while he was doing it, he would sing Gregorian chants in Latin. So it was such an exciting thing. And if you think of the visceral response it was, you got bacon and eggs cooking, which filled the house, right? And then you're hearing my dad singing in Latin, and you wake up in your footy pajamas and you go out and I'd walk across. He would make sure that when I would walk into the kitchen, I was usually one of the first kids up. And so I walk into the kitchen, he would back up because I would always have my head down because I was looking for bugs and anything on the ground, right? And I would be walking across his feet. And then he'd grab me and he'd put me on his feet. And he would walk around the kitchen a while, while the eggs were cooking. It was great. It's great. So neat guy. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Yes, I really enjoyed your description, how your nootropics work, all that stacks, how it works together. So could you explain maybe another mechanism? You talked about the upbeat, but what does upbeat, when should I use upbeat and when should I use something different?
This is a great question, Tim, because this is a feedback loop. Mm-hmm. I want to feel X. I don't feel X. So I'm going to take this component and it's going to help me get to X, right? So like today, before I got on this conversation with you, I took upbeat and brain flow. So acetylcholinesterase inhibitor and acetylcholine source. So I got those. That's a double boost of acetylcholine because one is keeping the enzyme from breaking down the acetylcholine and the other is an acetylcholine source. Multiple levels of acetylcholine source, including a oil-based acetylcholine source and a water-based. The water-based will come on faster, the oil-based will last longer, and it'll come on slower, less peakiness to it as well. Sorry. So like the upbeat is great for serotonin. So when I need to have this connection with you, I want my serotonin high, but I don't want the serotonin to be super dominant above my acetylcholine because I need to be able to reach memories from my past. I need to be able to connect with you on some of these deeper technological and neurological, neurochemical type of science pieces. But I don't want to have super drive because I don't need to be in that like super focused, lights out. I don't need to have the Bose sound canceling headphones on at this point. I need to have more of an openness. So these work really great. And then I use Xamarin Juice because it increases my GABA levels almost instantaneously. So any inherent nervousness that I might have about our conversation, believe it or not, talking to Tim, you can get nervous because this guy's smart.
So me too.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you want to be able to do, but there are other like when I need to have all day. We talk about energy, right? Energy is it can be a number of things. It can be artificial energy from like a caffeinated source or a stimulant source, or it can be real energy from ATP, or it can be a combination of both those, right? You may start with caffeine, knowing it's got a short half-life, and then hopefully the ATP based energy, maybe from PQQ or CoQ10, ubiquinol, or any of those sources might come in. So we like to modulate those in a way that is meaningful and useful for you. So so we have a thing called Apex, which is a super celastrous based capsule. Celastris paniculatus being a really incredible climbing tree, climbing vine that has these beautiful red seeds. That the oil of those seeds is really, really powerful, and then we combine that oil with some other components to really activate it and make it last longer and work well. And because it's ATP based energy, not a caffeinated rush, when you take Apex, you find that you don't feel anything right away. You just kind of go, okay, 40 minutes later, I'm a little more wakeful. It's kind of like that scene in Limitless when Bradley Cooper takes a clear pill the first time and he walks up the stairwell, and the wife of his landlord is standing there, and he suddenly hears the wheel of the bicycle spin and he sees the light come on a little brighter, and he just takes a glance at the textbook she's reading, and he knows what textbook that is and what page the information was that he got out of it, kind of the gestalt of that textbook. It's that kind of thing, is that you suddenly have 12 plus hours of that wakefulness and congruency and that elevated sense of purpose, without having these peaks and valleys of like a Red Bull or a 5-hour energy thing. So it's really important. And then, so that's Apex, which is a really great. So Apex's thing is acetylcholinesterase, ATP, an extended effect of nootropic. The other cool thing is Apex compounds over time. So if you take it like every 3 or 4 days, once every 3 or 4 days, in a month, you'll notice that your baseline level of cognitive performance is higher. So it's really cool. It's basically bringing your baseline up. And even if you go off of it, your baseline kind of remains up there. So it's really neat. It sets a new baseline. We have a thing called focus savagery. I think I've got some here.
You really love all the superheroes, right?
Exactly. Oh, totally. Yeah.
Awesome.
It's so funny. Yeah. And we do that, if you start looking at them as avatars of human performance, right? The superheroes are avatars of human performance. They've all got their own they all also acknowledge that they've got some Achilles heel, right? Tony Stark can't be a badass forever without his arc reactor. So here's an Apex.
Yeah.
So, and you'll see, but here's a cool thing on the Apex. So I'm not sure if you can see that. Might be out of focus and a little reflection.
Dark red point or something like that.
Yeah, there's a red dot on the back there. Again, it wasn't cosmetic. It's not intended as cosmetic. But what that red dot is a very specific kind of saffron extract. And that saffron extract is very well known for increasing sustained serotonin levels in the brain. We've spoken way too much about serotonin today, but what it does is it is more effective than, and I'm not a doctor. I'm not recommending doctor stuff. We're just a couple of guys that like to share what we learn on the internets. But that said, there's NCBI acknowledgement that certain kinds of Moroccan saffron are more effective than some of the most popular antidepressants at improving serotonin levels and getting the result of what an antidepressant is. Even though new research has said that it's not the serotonin, there's something else going on there. We just don't know what the secondary or tertiary effect of serotonin is. We just know that when we raise serotonin, something happens in the brain that helps to keep us from, it stabilizes our mood and helps keep us from having these big cycles of manic depression and then, manic highs and manic depression. So yeah, so we do that. We also do, here's a really cool one, man. So one of the things that I discovered, especially when marijuana became legal in the United States, is we had clients who had already refined their stacks, because all of our stuff is custom, right? We custom make it for your age, your sex, your weight, how often you work out, what you do for workouts, what your caffeine intake is per day, what your food intake is per day, what meds you're on, and what vitamins and nutrients and supplements you take, what your habits are, what your work schedule is, and then what your goals are. And then we customize your stuff. So we had these customers who have been working with us for a couple of years, and suddenly they're going, "Hey, my performance has fallen off." And I've talked about this in our intake and our feedback form. What could be happening? And I go, "Oh, did you remember to indicate that you're now, doing a little doobie at night, right? Taking a little weed?" You go, "Oh, yeah. I forgot about that." Yeah, well, that's going to slow down your system, especially cognitively, in the morning. And so what we did is we made a solution for that. I've been working on it for years. So it's called. So we have a capsule that you basically take and you pour under your tongue in the morning, and then we have another one you take at night. It's called Mental Reboot. And what it does to prep your brain so that your brain is at a optimum baseline canvas that you can paint all the neurotransmitters on in the morning. We created a system, a process within a capsule that takes advantage of the fact that your brain shrinks at night. And when your brain shrinks, cerebral spinal fluid will flow through it, and it'll basically flow alongside the capillaries. It actually opens up around the capillaries, and it flows outside the capillary. And there's a very thin membrane of capillary between you and the detritus that comes out, the tau and beta amyloid or amyloid beta proteins, and the poop coming out of your mitochondria, and it extracts it out of your brain through your spinal column and then out of your body. So it takes advantage of the thing that your body is already doing. It amplifies that process and clarifies it so that when you wake up, you've got this clarity. And that solved the problem of people taking these meds or taking this medicinal marijuana and having a reduced performance the next day. It cleans the palate again and gives you a canvas so that you can paint it with all these neurochemicals and nootropics. And so, yeah. That's kind of how that works. Then we got, and then we found that people liked to meter their approach. Like if you take a capsule, it's kind of like people that have ever done certain meds or certain drugs, right? They take a hit of X and they go, okay, or that could be X, right? It could be ecstasy. Take it ecstasy and suddenly they go, oh God, that's too much. That's too much of a feeling. Or, they take too much caffeine, right? They drink a Venti Starbucks, quad shot. They go, oh, that was still too fast. But the cool thing about doing liquid-based processes, you have three variables actually, but one is you can dissolve it in 16 ounces or 24 ounces or 32 ounces, a liter, right? You can dissolve it in varying degrees of concentration. You can also sip it at varying rates. And then you can also take competing molecules, like protein is competition for the amino acid chelates that are the primary elements that make up nootropics. So you can take your nootropic compound, you can sip it, and you can go, oh, that's too much for me. I'm not, I've gone off the performance curve, and now I'm too jittery or too agitated or too focused for my connection I have to have. Cool. You can take a little protein with it. You can slow down the amount, how fast you drink it. And you can immediately get back to your optimum state or super optimum state or your superhuman state. And you can operate there, but you can control it by how fast you drink it and what your concentration is as you drink it. And then you can add third-party elements like a protein or a fat to be able to modulate it to a rate that actually works better for you. So yeah.
That's pretty interesting. So I think just thinking about the bulletproof coffee. I think everybody knows the bulletproof coffee. Would you consider caffeine as a nootropic?
So my definition of nootropic might be a little bit different.
Yeah.
So and I think that we as a marketplace or as a neurochemist, we need to define that in I think a little bit more structured way. Does caffeine or caffeine and theanine or caffeine and fats or caffeine in MCT oil, does that improve clarity or wakefulness? Absolutely, and energy as well. But does it create neurogenesis? Probably not. I don't know that there's any evidence that caffeine improves neurogenesis, even when combined with theanine. So, what I define a nootropic as is a naturally occurring, typically naturally occurring, sometimes lab made. There's a lot of lab-made neurochemicals like racetams that are not dangerous, they're not caustic, they have no LD50, they're not going to kill a bunch of rats in an experiment. And so, but I define a real nootropic as something that either inspires or creates new neurons, because ultimately what we're looking for isn't a chemical-based induction into a state that's going to go away eventually, or as in the movie Limitless again, when you quit taking NZT, you suddenly felt sick, you looked really bad, you went into like zombie land, right? Your memory started skipping, all kinds of crap happened. And so that would be a downside of a really, really negative neurochemical response. So my definition, and I think that we should, as an industry, adopt it in the nootropics industry, which has now become, it's now big enough, we're approaching $1 billion a year type of total revenue on the whole nootropics market. I think the definition should be, we either inspire BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is the precursor to neurogenesis, or we directly inspire neurogenesis so that we can program neural pathways, increase memory, increase cognitive, performance, and it doesn't disappear immediately after the nutrition and compounds are out of your system, right? So I put that definition on it. At the same time, I realize the potential for non-neurogenesis inspiring neurochemical precursors or nutrients or supplements or extracts to give you an increased performance. But I would like that increased performance to be coupled with a direct and long-term improvement in our physiology and neurology. So that's my long-form definition. That's my Wikipedia entry for what is a nootropic.
That makes sense. Yeah, so it's interesting to if we do like a morning routine like you described, so you do maybe a little bit of a cold shower or cold bath, you don't have food, you have something like fasting, you have exercise,
Right.
And maybe we could do something like sauna and all of that stuff promotes BDNF. And if we do our nootropics, so we have a lot of BDNF. So
Right.
that's powerful. Maybe is it synergistic or how?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's a cool thing about BDNF. You can compound events.
Yeah.
Right. And like when you talk about a cold bath, right, and then sauna, you're doing both sides of the hormetic stress, right, evolution on your physiology. So what you're doing is you're basically causing these biological activities that are trying to like protect you from this event that you've just incurred. And in doing that, it improves mitochondrial output because you're strengthening the mitochondria. You're going, okay, that stressor I'm going to have to face someday. So this is what makes me stronger, right? What doesn't kill me makes me stronger. That's absolutely true when you go to the cellular level. One of the other elements of that, and one that we're really, really working diligently on, is we firmly believe that we should reinforce cellular membrane strength, right? So integrity of the cellular membrane. So we want to improve that cellular membrane integrity, and we also want to improve your cellular membrane respiration, right? So cellular restoration and cellular respiration. When you do both of those elements, what happens is you get less detritus, less bad cell activity going on. You improve the permeability rate in the cell. Like Rhonda Patrick would talk about, talks about her studies right now on inflammation. And what's really interesting is the gut wall, right? The stomach wall and the intestinal walls, they're very thin, surprisingly thin. And they act a lot like the blood-brain barrier in how they respond to inflammation and how they either let through toxins or block toxins while allowing good good chemicals to come through. And so this process of restoring cell wall integrity, which increases its ability to block bad stuff and increase good stuff and reduce full inflammatory response in the body, and then dramatically improve your cellular respiration, which is basically getting the right stuff, getting the right components into the mitochondria, into the cell, into the mitochondria, and then helping the mitochondria process them. Like PQQ is a great one. PQQ, especially for, like we've studied every PQQ available on the market, and Mitsubishi is the only company that makes the stuff that we consider world class. They grow it. It's grown and harvested. It's not lab derived out of some chemical combination. And that's, of course, it's expensive as hell. I think it's $4,000 or $5,000 a kilo for PQQ. I mean, it's unobtainium expensive, but 10 to 20 milligrams of it is super effective. You feel it right away. You start doing phosphatidylserine, phosphatidylcholine, you do PQQ, right? You do, CoQ10, and you'll suddenly find that these elements, which we build into all of our products, you find that that the way that your body responds is much quicker. Like you don't have to build up to a level, and you don't have to psych yourself up. It's like I used to play competitive tennis, and instead of going back behind the baseline on return of serve, I would come in between the service box and the baseline, and I would just be hyper vigilant. And I would do these very punchy strokes on the return to serve to try to hit the ball back faster than it came to me on the serve. So if my competitor was serving at 114 miles an hour, I was going for 120 mile an hour return to serve, and just like completely changed the game. Well, that took a very trained vigilance to get there. And that's a good thing to do. That's NLP in practice. That is basically saying, okay, I'm going for this specific state, in that case, vigilance, and I'm going to make that happen. But you should be able to kind of go into the state of optimized neurology physiology without having to really work hard at it. You should be able to go there and say, okay, I want to be there. And that's when things get really fun, because you can switch that. You know what task switching is, Tim?
Sure.
Right. You're going from one project to another. Yeah. So what if the weight or the drain of task switching was very low, so that you could move from one task to another without kind of having to go, okay, what am I doing again? How long is it going to take to do that? And like overthinking it and all that. You just kind of go into Kotler level flow from one task into another. And you almost take whatever the element is from the one thing that you were just doing, the one activity you were just doing, and you go, okay, a subset of that, the 30% of that is very similar to this next piece, this next activity I need to do. So I'm gonna take and get into the next activity with that 30%, and I'm gonna just flow right into it. Then I'm gonna expand the other elements in using the other neurochemicals and the state change, mental, physical, and neurochemical state change that I need to go. And now it's just, you're just going vroom, 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 and you're flowing like a ninja into each of those activities. And that's when you've really optimized state and you're able to take advantage of the neurochemical combinations that you're working with. Because if you have them, if you have enough of them waiting for you to attack, then you just go, okay, let's go use more acetylcholine right now. And I need a little bit of dopamine because I want to be the reward or the focus or both.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. Two questions. In the beginning, you said you have had some oils in the morning. So I'll ask you what kind of oils you use, and maybe it's for your cell membranes, I expect. And another point is that it's pretty interesting that we talk about brain power and nootropics and productivity right now, but we also talk about PQQ and more about longevity. And the fun part is that it seems like the nootropic stuff and what you do is like a fun way to work on longevity too. So it's all about longevity, but longevity is pretty boring right now. So
right. Yeah, waiting for it to come on, waiting for my longevity click. Yeah.
Yes.
So I was in Austin doing a podcast tour this last week with Anthony Benedettini, who's one of the rock stars on our team. And while I was there, Freddie gave me a test, a Russian diagnostic test that you hook up. And he basically said, because I'm 60 years old, right? And he said, no, you're 28 years old. You're just, chronologically 60, but you're, so it does make a difference. But within the context of going, okay, am I anti-aging or am I going for performance? One thing I learned early on when I was doing really, really hardcore nootropic, like I was getting these specialty drugs, modafinil is a great example. You bring it in, you go, okay, how does this work on my neurology and physiology? And, what are the problems associated with that? And what I realized was back when I was younger, we took a Pinto, Ford Pinto. Ford made this really crappy car that used to blow up if people rear-ended it. It was back in the 70s. And and if you put a turbocharger on that car, they had a 2000 cc engine in it that was actually a high performance racing engine, but it was just dumbed down because it was on a commuter car, right? Because Ford makes these incredible Formula One engines, and it's the same basic engine, 2000 cc 4-cylinder engine, just has fewer valves on it and lower compression. But if you take one of those engines that has 150,000 miles on it and you put a turbo on it, it's going to be really fun for the one block down your street. You're going to burn rubber, and then you're going to blow the head gasket and you're blow the engine up. So one of the characteristics I found was when you gave super high performance compounds to people that were not ready for those compounds because they didn't exercise, they were couch potatoes, they ate a lot of potato chips, and they didn't have these performance mindset, they didn't understand it. They got kind of freaked out when they did these high performance stacks because they just weren't ready for it. You don't put a turbo on a well-worn engine. So when you start talking about, the combination of longevity, like ATP, cell membrane, right, integrity, right, cellular restoration, respiration, well, those are, when you do those, what you're doing is you're reducing a layer of otherwise competing effects that would basically pull your body down into trying to work with, repair those things instead of going, I don't have to repair those things now. We're doing all that. I'm going to go work on this brain stuff through these neurochemicals that I'm doing. So this is kind of a really important characteristic. So what I do is I'm a real fan of krill oil. I'm a huge fan of algae oil. I like cold water, fresh water, salmon oil, omega-3 oriented salmon oil. And I love that stuff. And all of those, you start to feel an immediate effect. But I love those coupled with phosphatidylserine and phosphatidylcholine, so that you are essentially attacking every element of the cell and the and the respiration and the cellular membrane integrity and inflammatory response, and you're handling all of it at once. And then you're also restoring DHA in the brain, which the brain is primarily made up of that, the gray and white matter in the brain. So by restoring those oils in the body, that gives you a platform to be able to have the nootropics work much better. And one of the critical things that everybody needs to know, and by the way, we're coming out with a really cool product for this. I love it. is fats are really important for the absorption of certain neurochemicals, neurostimulants. So it's really important to basically take your nootropics with fat. I sometimes even take them with another level of methylated vitamin. Like methyl B12 is one of my favorites, methylcobalamin. And because they dramatically increase the benefits again of the nootropics. So when my mitochondria, and which is, again, anti-aging, cellular integrity, cellular respiration, right? When my mitochondria is working really well, my wakefulness is good. So now I don't have to work on, my nootropics don't have to pull me into wakefulness. They can go, okay, dude, you're already awake. Let's pull you into cognitive performance. Let's pull you into lateral thinking. Let's pull you into focus. Let's pull you into, heart chakra stuff. Let's pull you into, these super performance or reward or whatever. And that's kind of, So my routine in the morning definitely includes a boatload of fats. And also what I find is like I weigh about 206 pounds right now. My body fat is a little higher than I normally would have it. I'm bringing in the 15 to 18%. More like I like to stay to 12% to 15%. And then I love to go down to 10% just to see what ripped looks like. And then, and then I'll go back up to 10 to 12%. But I'm at a level, again, at 60 years old. I've been in an intense schedule for the last 2 years as we've, launched Nootopia and merged with with Bioptimizers, and then kind of felt my way around. I mean, this company is so much farther ahead than I was. That it takes navigation, and thankfully I've got navigation tools. So yeah, it's kind of how you navigate and why fats are important.
Yeah. Awesome. Sounds great. I'm pretty excited right now. So I tried a lot of nootropics in the last years, and I tried so much stuff. And for me, it's interesting because sometimes it works, sometimes not. But no, now I know why. So because from day to day, I'm different. But yes, it depends. It depends from so many factors. And you told us how many factors you observe. Yeah, what's that?
So one of the other aspects, Tim, if we can talk about this, one of the other aspects of this is, and that's really important. I mean, you're an awesome example of somebody that's self-aware enough and is driven to be a high performer. How old are you now?
I'm 30 right now.
I love it. God, man, you're a baby. I love it. What's your ultimate goal in life? Do you have like a mission statement for your life?
Sure. I love to want to understand how life works and want to teach this.
Awesome. That's critical.
So I'm all into health and fitness. I'm a sports scientist. I'm a mechanical engineer. I wanna live life fully and want to teach that. Yeah.
Dig it. It's so funny. I just hired a roboticist for my lab here to start building automated process. In fact, I've got an OpenTrons lab pipetting machine over here. And I've got one from QX in South Korea here for doing powder fill and those kinds of things. Now we're reverse engineering the robotics technology, because I got my certificate in robotics back in 1983.
I'm born in 1992. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, 9 years before that, I got my degree in that. Yeah. So when you think as a mechanical engineer, you think about levers and you think about springs and tension and movement and weight and counterbalance and rotational force and all of these factors that make great, industrial design and great design work. And so those are huge factors. And that's a very unique and very powerful way to think. I've got an industrial designer named Dan Cornish, who is the guy that designed like our, these new mag packs that we're doing.
Yeah.
And right. And he's just this absolute genius on not only thinking about how to make things beautiful, how to make them work better, but what are the sciences between new and emerging technologies, whether it's a certain durometer of a new silicon that can be used for, and it changes durometer based on space or heat or some other factors so that you can do cool things with it as a hinge or as a seal. Great stuff. So one of the things that we're doing is we've just developed a sleep system because sleep is not a one-dimensional thing. It's not sleep or not sleep. It's sleep, and then it's what are my theta levels, what are my delta levels, what are my alpha levels, and so understanding those different the neurology of it, and what the frequency your brain is operating at, and the subset of those frequencies is super important. So we made a product. This is a prototype of our sleep spray. This is a spray that you take 3 to 4 hits under the tongue, sublingual, let it dissolve. Tastes great, by the way. And then 20 to 30 minutes later, you take another 1 to 2 hits out of it. And what it does is it is for sleep onset. It gives you very fast sleep onset. And then the other thing is during the early morning hours when your body is, or when your brain is, or your brain and body are basically amplifying human growth hormone, and you get this human growth hormone excretion, it keeps you asleep during the body heat changes and that little energy spike that comes from HGH. That as you get older, the amount of melatonin and serotonin in your brain are inherently lower through pineal gland, expression. So you need to be able to cover that. So it does that, and it makes it so you don't wake up during that period, because if you take that 20 to 30 minutes at sleep onset, say 11 o'clock at night, well, at 3 or 4 in the morning, that half hour is now changed to an hour to 90 minutes. So you get this wonderful coverage during that human growth hormone raise. It also increases the level of HGH in your system through some of the precursors in it, the secretagogue analogs in there. And then we have a powder. You'll be able to take a couple scoops of powder, put it in a couple ounces of water, and that's a long sleep. It increases your delta sleep cycle. It also increases dream activity. So you get some nice REM stuff in there. And so you can start doing your lucid dream play. Because what we found was that if you don't sleep well, you don't wake well. You don't have wakefulness if you don't have quality sleep. So the idea in the development of this was sleep is the world's most, it's the world's most powerful stimulant. If you have good sleep, you're going to operate really well. And again, it's another contributor to nootropic. Then you take a mental reboot PM with it, and you're rock star. And then you take another mental reboot AM in the morning, You do sublingual. Now you've just raised your baseline up to a much higher level. So that canvas you're going to paint your neurochemicals on, is going to be much cleaner, much brighter. You're going to have a couple of really nice soft lights on it, soft boxes on it. And you're working with an 8K red camera, as you walk through life. So yeah, man.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, sure. Sleep is a big one. Yeah. And I read your books, From Sick to Superhuman, from the Biooptimizers, the book, and the Brilliant Mind from Utopia.
Awesome.
It's both pretty awesome. I really like that because it's pretty practical takeaways. And
we're improving on that. I'm going to be doing a series on Sick to Superhuman and show examples that people can take away. They go, oh, okay, here's a way to analyze myself and find out where my Achilles heel is and where I'm a rock star, so that when you enter the Sick to Superhuman spectrum, you go, oh, I'm really, because overall, an aggregate of all of my different, neurological and physiological ups and downs, I'm entering at this level. So I don't have to do a lot of catch up. But I really want to be at this level, and just again, we're talking about, for those of you watching, Barry from The Flash,
Superheroes.
is you can't, just like a superhero, whether it's a Marvel or a DC, or I'm trying to remember the comic book company in Portland, but you don't live in superhuman it's not an area you live in. You go to it, you experience it, you do what you need to do in that, and then you take off your cape, you take off your cool, your mask, and then you go back to being a super optimal or an optimal individual while you're navigating life. And then you go, oh, but I need to be a rock star here. I'm going to go with Jeb Corliss, and I'm going to put on a wingsuit, and I'm going to go carve the canyons, in a wingsuit. Well, you probably want to get into superhuman state at that point, right? So, or a downhill ski, or any of these activities that are going to take that kind of superhuman, critical, like the road racing. When I was road racing, I had to go into superhuman state when I was playing competitive tennis, or when I was running century rides, or when I was bodybuilding. I had to, pump myself into that state and get there. And my awareness is super high. Or when I was hang gliding was great because you really need to have optimal, you're listening to the wing as it's flapping. You're feeling the amount of air, across your body, across your face. You're kind of taking account of the tilt of the wing, right? And you're also going, I don't want to just be monitoring this thing. I want to proactively have a relationship with this wing, and I want to go play with it, right? I want to go fly. And so you've got all of these factors that are working. And I think it's really important that we understand what it feels like to get there, which nootropics are great at. We groove in those neural pathways so that we can go there when we want to on demand. And that we also are sensitive to how we feel. So we don't end up burning out in trying to be, live in superhuman. I'm going to live in superhuman land. Well, that's fun. But again, that turbocharger, eventually your engine's going to go, screw it, buddy, head gasket blow. And that's when you got to reboot your whole system and go into rehab or, somewhere else to try to recover. So yeah, that's the truth, man.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an awesome mission. So how could people start?
So my recommendation, I mean, here's a cool thing. So I think you probably have a custom link or at least a discount code for your.
Yeah, sure. I have a custom link and I will attach it in the show notes so everybody can click on it and maybe do the quiz. I did the quiz too and I really loved it. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you go to Nootopia, the website at Tim's link, you're they're right at the top of, above the fold, as they say. Above the fold is a big, bright yellow link button. You're going to press that button and you're going to take a neurochemical analysis. That to me is like a great starting point because you'll then have an idea of kind of how you operate in the world and how you operate best. It's a great analysis. You get some data at the end of it that's helpful. But the really cool part is then you go, okay, so now I know where my neurochemical analysis is. How do I go into these states? How do I like do this sick to superhuman process? So you're also going to downline the Brilliant Mind Blueprint. And so you're going to be able to get an idea of the process. And then what we do is as you go through and you fill out we call our medical intake form, where basically we analyze your height, weight, sex, age, right? Your eating habits, your workout habits, all of that. Then we ask you, what do you want to achieve? Like we have these sliders that you can push from 0 to 5 that say, I don't want any of this, but I want a lot of this, or I think I want a lot of this. And you adjust those. And then we've got an unlimited comments field. We have people that have written us novels in the comments field. And it's really important because we want to know as much about you as possible. We're not HIPAA compliant, but we built for HIPAA compliance, meaning that this is private information that it isn't shared with anybody except for our formulators who in our lab are customizing your nootropic components just for you. They're making each pill, each powder, each drink, and each spray just for you. And because we put this sounds salesy, but we put a 365-day, money back return on this. So there's no risk. So you can kind of go, with abandon at it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to ship you these products, but just as important, we're going to ship you a box of things that you can use to optimize your neurology through nootropics, right? But we're also going to get you an app that you can use on your phone to try to go through and try to figure out exactly what you're feeling that day with those nootropics. We give you a journey to go on. So you can just look up the journey that day and say, oh, here's what I'm taking this day. Here's what I want. Here's what I'm feeling. And that gets you into a point of that kind of performance. And then you're journaling that for us. You're going, oh, this made me feel like a rock star. It was great. Or this didn't make me feel as much as I thought it would. Can you improve it? Can you make it better for me based on my, neurology? And we go, yeah, we can. And so, then your next shipment gets it better and better and better based on your physiology. And the other side of this that we really recommend is that you share with us. You can do it in video, you can do it written, you can do it on our Facebook page or whatever. Let us know how you feel and how this is working for you. When I started this in 2008, it was the tragic death of my wife at the time. And she committed suicide because opiates had taken over her life and she could no longer feel anything. Like she had no emotional connection to anything. She had no, and it was just really sad. So when I started, it was it was a lot of testing, a lot of exercise. And what I found out that one size doesn't fit all, and that what works for me doesn't necessarily work for you. So we built a spectrum of solutions that can benefit everybody, and that we can customize to the point where you can go, all right, I've got my engine rebuilt. I've got a brand new high pressure head gasket with grooved in O-ring seals that you can't blow out if you try. Let's go put that turbo on. And you can go to this performance level, and you can tell us when you're feeling that way. And you can tell us what combination of ingredients you use, which capsules and which drinks and how much of each you took, and how you slept the night before and how you ate that day. And then we can replicate that. We can give you the pattern to replicate that on demand. And then you become very, very powerful in whatever it is you want to do. We want to make, we want to bioptimize, we want to biologically optimize every soul in the universe. So that's kind of our goal. That's our overarching goal. And everybody in our company meditates on that every Monday for a minute, as a group, because we really want to move the needle with that. And we love people like you, Tim, who have that same contact, that same, pain for people, a desire to see people perform, and you're doing it yourself by you're taking the stuff, you're working on the stuff, you're working on yourself, you're studying from the greats, you're aggregating their insights into something that are bite-sized for people to be able to digest. And I think it's really important work that you do, man.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I would ask you about your mission statement. I think that was your mission statement. So that's beautiful. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I was called. I was called. I don't want to cut you off, man, but I was called to make a monumental contribution to every life I touch. So my thing is what is it that I have that I have in abundance that is special that I can contribute to your life, so that you walk away a better person, and or with another tool, or with more hope, or more desire, or more passion, or more integrity. And I think that to me is what's fulfilling. And that's what I feel like every morning when I wake up, that's kind of my calling, and that I get to do,
That's so beautiful. Yeah, I really love what you said. So I'm personally working a lot with mobility. So I'm promoting a mobility routine for everyone. But the purpose of the mobility routine is more that our brains work better, we make better decisions, and in the end we come closer to our vision and make the world a better place. So, and that's so beautiful that you do the same with the nootropics and movement nootropics, all that stuff, all this conscious decisions are so powerful. Yeah. So I think
dude, I'm totally with you on that. And in fact, again, with my age, right, mobility is huge, and I've pushed myself to the limit on a number of things. I heard a shoulder in 8th grade that it's never recovered, and it's my serving shoulder, right, my tennis shoulder. I decided not to change hands to right hand. I like being left-handed, and so mobility has been huge. And I've been working on. I've got a sciatica nerve that is with a prolapsed vertebrae, right? So it's collapsed in a prolapsed vertebrae. So I have numbness in my legs. So I've been working on both neurochemical and biochemical repair of the myelin sheath, which is what I've been doing. And then also mobility exercises to basically open up that vertebrae and get it so that it's less constricting on that nerve bundle. And then eventually I'll have some radical DNA altering insights to be able to apply to this. But without the mobility part of it, it's been huge. I think it's something that we take for granted. Like when I was 30 and I was doing hood to coast runs, it's a 179-mile run from Mount Hood in Oregon to the coast of Oregon. So, and there was a handful of my runners in this relay race we do. And I never liked massage. Like I just didn't like people. I'm probably autistic, so it's probably more of a, right. But once I started experiencing that, just recently, in fact, it just changed my life. Like, holy crap. I didn't realize how facial muscles, how the fascia and the muscle integrity, how that can be loosened up and it can be broken apart, and you can release toxins doing that. And then heat and cold exposure and just stretching. And then of course you go on, then you sadly go on to Instagram and you find some of these girls that can do the splits upside down while balancing on one hand, or you got the guy that's doing like the crawl across the ground, right? He's doing these incredible crawls that are just, with the knee up to the chest, and they're doing like military crawls, and they're doing these, and then they're rolling over, and it looks like a slow motion tumble down a hill, right? And it's all about mobility and strength and building up a tendon. It's pretty crazy stuff. Speaking of which, that's what you can do with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think the brain is built for movement. So if we move better, our brain is better. But if our brain is better, our movement is better too. So it's an awesome loop. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. By the way, you got incredible, man. You got definite excellent muscle tone. Yeah.
I'm really into this crawling stuff on the ground. Yeah, I could do that. Yeah. That's
it looks cool. It looks cool, doesn't it? It looks like fun, and it looks like, that's the thing is that as we find like Jesse Elder, doing grounding, right? So taking his shoes off and just walking out on the beach or walking out on the grass. I think it's really important for us to connect with Mother Earth and to get that kind of feeling, reminding ourselves that we're not all concrete, glass, and steel. There's a lot more to this world than that. And like we just recently added diatomaceous earth to some of our products. And because we think that there's a missing element in that. In fact, that was a Chastity find right over there. There's Chastity. She's
Hi.
She's like, and we're finding that some of these little tiny micro elements make big macro improvements to our lives once we engage them. And they sound so innocuous. You say, a little diatomaceous earth, take a 10 million year old, single cell organism and its shell and get it out. And you go, well, holy crap, it moves the needle in terms of performance if you take it off and put it together. So you're really excited about. And here's the other thing, Tim, and I know you'll agree with this. I feel like just today we have a team in Bosnia. Do you know where Bosnia is? Right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Bosnia-Herzegovina. We have a Bosnian team. We basically fund a whole wing of a university there, International Birch University. And so we have 7 full-time PhDs and 9 PhD candidates, and all they do is research for us. And we feed them a problem, and then they go through it and they run through all the testing and the in vitro and in vivo and they're starting mouse studies now. And we built Disneyland for mice. We have one of our principals in our company is a Buddhist, and so he said, if we're going to do any kind of live animal studies, we need to do it in a better condition than they would have in the real world, out in a field somewhere or something like that. And so we basically built the mouse lab of the future with, it's like a way more pleasant environment than they would ever have. And what we're doing is we do these hardcore reverse analysis of process and product that help us to dive deeper into what's going on. And I think we've only that where we're at in the study of how the brain works, how the body works, how neurochemicals work, we have hit a fraction of 1%. I mean, I wake up every day and I read NCBI research and examine.com aggregation of research and those things. I go, crap. I mean, how did I miss that? Or how did we miss that as a whole? And look at this new discovery. So anyhow, I think it's really important that we do that stuff, that we continue to check in, and that we don't close our minds. We have to put blinders on and focus for a while and execute. But it's really important that we open up our minds and our bodies and spirits to what is it that we don't know, right? That we don't know, so that we can be open to these discoveries. If I worked just from a science basis, like purely from a science basis, I never would have been able to come up with the formulations that became Nootopia, because science said that a lot of the science hadn't combined the elements that we combined to increase the potential of those elements to make them efficacious, to make a subclinical dose act like a superclinical dose. It just wasn't there. The research wasn't there because nobody was hacking as hard, or they didn't care because it didn't meet the criteria for a research paper that they were trying to get a predictable outcome. I made an unpredictable outcome, and then I turned that into something that you and I could use. So yeah, man, we're early. We're early.
Yeah. So I love this idea of, maybe I would call it biohacking. So because the medical system is way too slow. So we aren't doctors, and that's good in a way, that we can experiment, we can take a risk, and everybody can decide on his own. That's okay. It's now not our responsibility in a way. So So, and that's why you can so innovative and so fast, and that's beautiful. I like that.
Yeah. In fact, I was Paul Check and I had spent an hour on the phone the other day, and Paul's an incredible guy, very much into plant medicine and organic and natural. And he said, hey, let's quit calling it biohacking. Let's call it bioharmony.
Yeah, nice.
That was such a beautiful statement, right?
Yeah.
Bioharmony, man.
If you want to see, if you're interested in my takeaways and insight from this episode and clear protocols, so look to the takeaway and insight video that is in German and look to the show notes. Make sure to subscribe to my channel and leave us a review. So enjoy your day. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this was inspiring for you and you want to try something that we discussed and you are thrilled to explore this optimal brain states.